Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast.
So much, Crystal. Thanks for the invitation. I'm doing great. Happy to talk to you.
I was reading about your work. You are a busy woman. You have done it all, from art historian, author, multidisciplinary artist. Like, it's crazy all the things you're doing. But I always like to go back to where people started, where they came from. Talk a little bit about your background and what brought you to Paris.
This is a great question. I love questions. And thank you for this opportunity to sort of reflect on how I got to where I am, because sometimes you're right. I feel like I'm working on a lot of different things in different places, and it's wonderful to find the opportunity to connect them and see that maybe a lot of the different things that I do somehow really do connect. I think that's a source of some creative energy, those links. But anyways, I grew up in Austin, Texas. I learned Spanish as a second language growing up. So French is a beautiful language, but it doesn't, since de La Salle, the French colonialist was in Texas in the late 17th century. French just doesn't serve much of a purpose in Texas. So I spoke English and Spanish growing up, studied in New York, then sort of wanted to get a bit farther away and open horizons more, studied in London, which is where I met a French person, and we decided I would give it a try living in France. So I learned French when I arrived in Paris 17 years ago now. And I've been writing, teaching, making France home ever since.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's the story for a lot of us, is we fall in love and we stay. And I mean, what a great story. Why not? Love bringing you to Paris. Talk a little bit about what sparked your interest in writing and art history. Like, have you always been interested in those things since you were a child, or how did you end up pursuing that?
Definitely, I've always been interested in writing. And I remember, as a kid, being interested in journalism, and always loved reading, and definitely interested in writers and women writers growing up. I don't know if it was so clear, though, the path looking back, I don't think the path was ever very clear at the beginning. I remember for a time as a kid, I was interested in law. And I think when I first started studying art history, I looked at, or I talked about the way I look at artworks, or art historians can look at visual arts sort of in a way that a lawyer could build up a legal argument, where you're taking evidence from a situation, a visual situation or a lived situation, and building up your argument with pieces of observation. So I remember sort of making that logical jump, maybe to defend my decision to my family, to go from legal studies or accounting studies and jump into art history. For me, art history was a way to connect my interest in writing, my interest in building up arguments in words, and also a place to cultivate a real proximity and a meaningful proximity to artists and artworks. I very quickly, with an art history, my undergraduate art history degree, there's a historical survey that has to take place. You start in the wonderful places of the Lascaux caves and communicating a visual world across time and across cultures. But I very quickly gravitated to a concentration in the modern period and the idea of modernisms and the idea of contemporary art, because I felt like in the space of our recent history, there is a proximity to living artists, and there's also less of an established understanding or consensus of what that artwork or what that artist is about, that the conversation is still happening. So to be able to be part of that figuring out process with modern and contemporary art was interesting to me. And then I think too, when I continued, I did a master's degree in London at Royal College of Art, which was fantastic. And I feel like curating and some of the curating projects that I've done, that's a real sort of hands-on way to enter in the conversation of what an artist's work is about, or what it can touch on, or how it can resonate in curating an exhibition and dealing with the sort of exhibition space. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Very well. I mean, I think it's interesting what you said about how like kind of your favorite period is modern art, because it is interesting to kind of, question, okay, what are they telling us? And, some artists will never, let us know what they mean or what we're supposed to see in their work. And I think there's something really beautiful in that, because it's just like anything, it's like you impress your impression on it, like it
Yes.
should be an open-ended question. It shouldn't be like, this is the answer. That's what it's all about.
Mm. Yeah, no, and there's definitely different strategies that artists take when they're putting their work out in the world. And, someone like Virginia Woolf, who I greatly admired, whose sister was a painter, and she, I don't know if it was sibling rivalry or a bit of a complex about being a writer, but she talked about, the visual world and artist language is out there as a language in itself. There's the painter's language, there's the sculptor's language, and what can writing even add to that? And what more can you give? So it's also a question of translation and interpretation. So I think that process is interesting too. And, artists make decisions about how much they want to communicate on their work. I'm teaching a class this spring at Paris College of Art called Artists on Art. And it's been really interesting for me to work with the students, because the majority of them are art students, and they're trying to figure out different strategies and language, and also what theories and elements of art history are relevant to a sort of verbal contextualization of their practice. And there's definitely different strategies that artists that we know about have taken. Someone like Thomas Hirshhorn, for example, he'll speak loads about his work and really explain all his tools and all his thinking and his reasoning. And very generous in that way, sort of opens the door conceptually to his work. But then you have another artist, equally fascinating, but essentially silent on what his work was about, on Kawara, and famously refused to interview, give interviews about his work, just destroyed a lot of his early work, and felt that the production that's made in the studio and it's hung in the gallery wall or the museum walls, that it speaks for itself, that there's not an added layer of explanation that needs to go into it.
Yeah,
So
and I
that's
think that
interesting.
yeah, it's definitely interesting and to compare how each artist was like, okay, this is how much you get, this is how much you don't get. It's like
Yes,
I
exactly.
like that. It's different. And especially in the world, we're evolving so fast and now, everyone's talking about AI and the arts and AI creating paintings and writings and kind of taking away critical thinking in a lot of ways. And what are your
Mm.
feelings about AI in the art world?
This is a tricky question. And me, who's so analog, still with my big notebook and favorite pen, I it's a new element that's present. It's arrived very quickly, but I think if we think of AI as a tool in the same way as a user-friendly laptop or a notebook with smooth, blank, wide pages to write, a good inky pen. If we can think of it as a tool to be used by the autonomous, creative human thinker, then that's great. I've used AI in terms of translation or transcription programs, and it's phenomenal. But I don't think it can replace the human mind and the process of just transcribing a conversation by hand. I learned so much about the human brain and the human capacity to listen and respond. So it's definitely present. It's definitely a tool for us to use as just that.
Yeah, definitely. It can only
Right.
help us, and it's not going anywhere. Like it's going to be integrated into our lives. I mean, same way probably people felt when the computer came out or when social
Yes.
media came out, people were like, "Oh my gosh." And now everyone uses it. So, it's just a matter of finding ways that it can be helpful and, we're still using our brains, hopefully. It's just using it as a tool.
Yeah, and if anything, I think it helps us understand maybe a bit better like how our brains work and how our brains work differently. Because I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I feel like we've just come leaps and bounds these last couple of years as AI develops and our understanding of how the human brain works. So absolutely, there are different spaces and different yeah.
Yeah, it just depends on what you're doing and how, definitely. And talk a little bit about, you're living in Paris. There's such a rich artistic culture, so much history. How has that influenced your work?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's an extraordinary place to be. And I think of my children growing up in a city like Paris. It's just so rich historically and culturally, so international. Very, very different from the small city that I grew up in, Austin, Texas, and and it is a sort of a meeting point, international. It's been a refuge at many points throughout history for exiled artists coming from Latin America, coming from the United States, coming from Eastern Europe. It's really been very rich culturally, and it's been a safe and supportive place for the arts at particular moments over history. Not always, of course, but I think that's important to remember too. And the way that the French culture and the French government, to be honest, values and supports creative production, the system of artist studios that are around Paris, and also the system of collections, the FRAC system, for Fondation Régionale des Arts Contemporains, the museum system that acquires artworks made in France. It's really extraordinary and special that it's as a country, as a culture, creative production is valued and supportive supported. I think it's really it's helpful for individual artists to be able to have that financial support. Of course, there can always be more, but it sets a tone for an entire culture. I think in the museum system, it's really intimidating at times, but wonderful to be a creative person in a city like Paris. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's something I often ask my guests. I'm like, why do artists keep coming to Paris? I mean, obviously, you just named a
Yeah,
lot of reasons,
yeah,
but there's so many places in the world that we can go live and are beautiful. But Paris seems to always be this like artist hub. Like people keep coming even today. Maybe just from the ripples of knowing so many famous artists that went there. It's just very interesting.
yeah. No, and I think the word that you use, hub, is really true. And what you're doing with this podcast. I think there's not only this beautiful architecture, beautiful history of the city. It's sometimes that sometimes can be the criticism of Paris, that it's the museum city. But museum, it can have a negative connotation of that it's dead, or it's just to be looked at, not to be engaged with. But what you're doing with this podcast, and what places like the American Library is doing with their extraordinary evenings with the author program, or other very dynamic bookstores, or literary groups and workshops around Paris are doing, it's an active place too. There is a hub. And I found too that maybe particularly, or maybe I say particularly just because this is what I know, but among the expat community, there is a very supportive energy where people say, "Oh, do you know this place? Or do you know After Eight Books? Or do you know the Red Wheelbarrow? Or have you been to the program at Yvon Lambert?" There's a willingness to help people plug in to this energy, and to keep that creative space active.
Yeah, I completely agree. The word plug in, I mean, it's very hard to move to Paris. It can be very lonely in the beginning, but at the same time, like you said, once you're plugged in, like people are so helpful and people want to get together. They want to exchange.
Yeah.
They want to, have these experiences, these creative experiences. And I think it's really amazing. It's why I stayed so long, because you just meet so many fascinating people and they want to help you, which is not true in all cities.
Yeah, it's not true in all cities, but I think it's a special, and it's a supportive community for sure. And no, I think now that I can speak French, but those first that first year or two was hard. And my joke, the first year I moved to Paris, Crystal, I have to tell you, my joke was, in fact, no one in Paris actually speaks French, because I would canoe through my first complete sentence in French, and my strong accent, or my all the syntax and grammar mistakes would come out, and the French person wouldn't reply in French. They would reply in English. So it took me a year. It took me a year to get my first reply in French, but that was victory. It was kind of like love when I finally got my French citizenship, my application for French citizenship accepted. It was, I'm speaking French to you, you're going to speak French back, and I'm asking France to be my country, and they finally said yes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. I think we all struggle with that. I know even sometimes today they respond to me in English. They just look at me and they're like, English. I'm like, come on, I'm trying here. Like,
I still get it too, Crystal. I still get it. 17 years later, I've got the kids in the French schools, and I get, "Oh, how long are you visiting?" But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of the accent too. I've become a foreigner a bit everywhere, but then I think you're able to look at things a bit differently when you're looking at things from the outside.
yeah, definitely. I think it keeps our brains going for sure. And it is
creative to live in a foreign country. You're constantly problem solving.
Constantly problem solving, constantly trying to figure out a navigation system. It's the creative cartographies. Yeah, for sure.
And talk about your new book, Playgrounds.
Oh, thank you so much for asking. Yeah, playgrounds. Playgrounds is something that happened here in Paris, and it really was a big learning process for me. As I said, I have children. They were born in Paris, and they've been growing up sort of at the same time as my work and my career as a art writer and writer and art history teacher has been developing. And when they were little, I had sort of the work, my professional work as a writer and as a teacher, and then I was also doing art history research in the doctoral program at École du Louvre. So I had that going on sort of as a separate outside of home project. And then I had the work, which is real work of a wonderful work and heart work in the sense of HEART that but for a long time, especially when they were young and not all the kids were sleeping through the night and I was exhausted, I really felt that those were two separate zones. The time that I was at the playground with the kids, that this was something separate than my art writing or art history research. But then more and more, I was there at the playground, the kids were running around, all sorts of very interesting sociological observations, of course, going on. You're at the playground, watching the kids play, watching the other parents or grandparents or caretakers parent or caretake. And there was a point when I realized, these don't have to be separate zones, the parenthood and the art historical research, that the playground perhaps could be a sort of bridge, sort of an overlapping section of the Venn diagram where my art history research can intersect with this thinking and trying to figure out what it means to be a parent. And in the city of Paris, there's some beautiful playgrounds all over the city. Each arrondissement has its green spaces marked out on the city plan, and playgrounds, started arriving in the city late 19th, early 20th century. And Proust writes about playgrounds in one of the first volumes of Les Temps Perdus. He sees Albertine for the first time. Proust sees his female love interest for the first time in a playground near Champs-Élysées. So it's a charged public space. It's a place that we share. And the playground is a place that artists, ever since it arrived into the vocabulary of modern life, at the moment when changes were being made in terms of child labor laws and a sense of how modern societies should be structured and organized, when shifts started happening in terms of what we expect and what we imagine parenthood should be, playgrounds start to arrive, right? And so playground architecture, playground design really reflects a lot of these belief systems. Proust sees the playgrounds early 20th century in Paris. I see playgrounds as many parents do in their first years and as a parent. So the project of playgrounds really was a goal to try to make sense of that playground space, the playground time, and bring in some of my skills as a researcher and as a writer and an art historian. So it really was a sort of practical situation and a social media situation, I'll tell you. Practical situation of being on the wooden benches, sitting on the wooden benches around some of the playgrounds in our neighborhood with the kids. I've got my notebook out on my knees. I'm trying to recap the notes, following up from a studio visit or quick do edits for a review. I've got to reply to Art Forum for something like this. And I realized, I'm in the playground writing. And then I look on social media and I see my good friend, Chloe Briggs, who is also a teacher where I teach at Paris College of Art. And she's posted, this is right the year before COVID, actually. She's posted on Instagram some drawings of the playground that she's made while her son Jack was playing. And I suddenly realized, I'm making the research about what playgrounds are for artists like Isamu Noguchi, who's designed quite a few playgrounds, had wonderful dreams about what playgrounds could be. Nikki Sanfal, in her later decades, this was the bulk of her work, was sculptures and playful, joyful objects for the public space. Looking at that and then seeing Chloe's doing the same thing as I am. She's in the playground actually making work. So it was, the playgrounds came together at that moment with Chloe, where we both brought our reflections on how we use the playground as a mother, as a caretaker, and how also we use and see the playground as a creative person. Because there's also, there's this site of the playground and there are artistic interventions into what the playground can be, what it could look like, how it could be different, how we can reimagine this shared public space. But then there's also this method of play. So how can play as a method come into a practice for a writer or for a visual artist? So it was really quite simple the way we put the book together. I drew on a lot of the research that I had been putting together over the years for an essay. And then what we did for our shared intervention in the publication was we basically sat down on a bench at a playground in Belleville and talked about what the playground is for us in our creative work and our work as a parent, as mothers. And we built the structure of the book around that conversation. And we illustrated a series of 14 of Chloe's drawings of playgrounds, which are beautiful, playful, abstract images that she made in direct response to seeing her son play and engage with the playground architectures. So it was a really interesting format to play with, if I may. And then we've continued to animate that project through a workbook. And we've also done a series of workshops, really using the thinking about playgrounds that we developed in the book, and some of these ideas about what a playground can be, what play can be for writers and for visual artists. And we've animated the workbook and talked about the project at the American Library. We have and also at Cometa last year. And then we have a program planned for the spring at a really phenomenal international artist residency very near Montparnasse, which was used by some of the artists from the École de Paris movement, 100 years ago. Modigliani, Soutine worked there. Anyways, now it's organized and led by a project called L'air Arts at Atelier 11. And Chloe and I, as part of the Printemps du Dessin, which means the Spring of Drawing program that functions across France, will do a workshop at the L'Air Arts at Atelier 11 studio in the springtime, in early April. And we'll talk more about the playground projects, and we'll lead a workshop for drawing and for writing that connects to some of the themes of play and playground and reimagining shared public space, really. And then I'm going to also bring in some examples and ideas and inspiration, really, from the practice of Nikki Sanfal, whose first studio was really very, very close to L'Air Arts Atelier 11. She was at Passage Ronsin in the 60s, and when she was making some of her first shooting paintings, which is what she's most known for. But I think really some of Nikki Sanfal's most interesting work is the work that she made towards the end of her life, when she's looking at the public space and she's looking at the play space, and really going back to a very complex, especially for her, especially for Nikki Sanfal, very complex and complicated childhood space. She was a victim of sexual violence as a child. Nikki Sanfal, she also in the 1960s, she left her family, she left her children and her husband because she felt that she couldn't be an artist and also be a mother at the same time. But then again, at the end of her life, what she's doing is being really an extraordinary grandmother. When you read some of the interviews and listen to some of the interviews with her granddaughter Bloom Cardenas, who runs the Tarocchi Garden, the Tarot Garden in Italy now, which was her beautiful project at the end of her life, Nikki Sanfal. She returns to that childhood space through these amazing, colorful, playful, joyful works that are intended not for the wall of a museum or the collector's sculpture garden, but for public space. She's building monster sculptures that have 3 tongues coming out of their mouth for slides, for children's size, for children to enjoy. So I think that she's very interesting to look at. So we're going to talk a lot about Nikki Sanfal. Maybe look at some of her early drawings, her early collage work. That's some of the first work she made as a visual artist were collages. So yeah. Oh, and I guess another thing to point out too when I say collages is that the Playgrounds project with Chloe, it's not it's playgrounds in the plural. And I think maybe that's something too I want to point out. Crystal is I have a new project called Collages, and then a publication I did before Playgrounds called Portraits, and it's all plural, right? And I think the fact that there's not just one playground or one collage or one portrait, that there's an idea of there's a multiplicity of interpretations for these places. And when you have a plural for playgrounds, it opens the door for other propositions, other reimaginings. And so, yeah, just to point that out.
Oh my God. I'm so excited to read this book. It sounds fantastic. And
thank you.
It's like a subject people haven't really touched on, and it's kind of I had a guest last week. She was talking about, how she thought when she became a mother, she wasn't really an artist anymore. And she was like, no, wait a minute, like becoming a mother is like the ultimate act of creation, So I love how it all ties together. And what is the biggest takeaway you hope people have from the book?
Well, no, I think it's really important you point that out of, playgrounds and the space of motherhood. That is complicated because, of course, playgrounds can also be a space. I think it remains an interesting territory, even if you're not a parent. It's essentially a public space, and essentially it's a political space. And one of the artists that really opened my eyes about this subject, playgrounds, is a painter called Eleni Shatbrashvili, who she's from Tbilisi. She went to Beaux-Arts Paris, so I met her in Paris. She works here now. 2022, I saw a canvas by Eleni Shatbrashvili on display at the gallery in the Marais that sadly is no longer open, GB Agency. And Elene's painting was called Terrain de Jeu, playground. And Elene is a young person. She's not a mother. She was looking at a playground and painting this beautiful canvas that, by the way, has now been acquired by the Museum of Modern Art, Paris. Musée d'Art Moderne Paris has acquired a second version of this canvas. And she was looking at this playground in Paris, in Tbilisi, at the moment of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So she's looking at the playground as a political space, that's shaped by our beliefs about how the world can be and how we can be in the world together. And she was looking at the playground as a space where maybe we can reimagine those structures. So that really was an eye opener that she's looking at the playground as a political space.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah. Anyways, I don't think I entirely answered your question. You're talking about yes, this separation between motherhood and artistic space. Yeah, it's unfortunately it's still a question for a lot of artists, and there's still this belief that you can't be a mother and be an artist. Whereas I don't think I've ever heard any male artists say, "Oh gosh, I can't be a father and be an artist." It's a very interesting creative space. Obviously, maternity and it's becoming more and more of a subject, and thankfully so. Thankfully so.
Yeah, it's funny that we even to say like a man saying, "Oh, I can't be a father," and an artist is like,
No. This is not. This is not there. But it's all a belief system, really. It's what do we believe a parent should be, a mother or a father should be? What do we believe an artist should be? If I may, I think France gives a tiny bit more space to be a parent and to be a creative person or a professionally active person, just because of the increased amount of childcare support there is in France, the crèche system, the maternelle system. If you look at the percentage of mothers in the United States where there is no public childcare, there is no public supported preschool education. If you look at the percentage of mothers who with children under the age of 5 who work in the United States, it's much, much smaller than in France, where there is, from very young, a very, very good professionalized, publicly supported childcare and early childhood education system. That is major. And then beliefs about how present parents should be and what autonomy parents should cultivate for their children. That's also reflected in the structures of the playground. For example, in the US, there's a feeling that parents should be much more hands-on and a little bit more, helicopter?
Yeah.
But when you go to the United States, the playground structures themselves are actually bigger, because the parents are expected, and I witnessed it myself, to climb up on the play structures with the children, right? Whereas in France, the playground structures are just as colorful and wonderful and safety oriented as our current moment is, but they're just that much smaller. So it's not really possible for the parents to climb up through the tunnel and up the tube and get down the slide. These are structures made for young people, and there are a lot. So then, there are a lot more benches. There are a lot more of these green painted wooden benches surrounding the playgrounds in France, which is exactly where Chloe and I sat down to have this conversation from our book for our book Playgrounds. And, the fact that those benches are there, that opened the possibility for us to observe this place, and really use it and start thinking about it. So there, it sort of loops the loop there.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'm very excited to pick it up. And where can people buy it?
Oh, excellent question, Crystal. Thank you. Of course, we'll have this event coming up soon at Les Arts Atelier 11 if you want to see the playground composition in action. But yes, absolutely. We've got 3 excellent Paris bookstores that support the project. One is the Red Wheelbarrow bookstore. This is right there, perfectly located across from the Jardin Luxembourg, the beautiful park full of beautiful playgrounds in the 6th arrondissement. The Red Wheelbarrow has copies. And also on the right bank, you can find copies at After 8 Books, which is a wonderful art bookstore in the 10th arrondissement. Or in the Marais at the Librairie Yvon Lambert, which is a very special place because it's a art gallery and a bookstore at the same time. So they've got a few copies of Playgrounds from our 2nd edition, actually, on the shelves too. So yeah.
Fabulous. And people can order it online as well.
Yes, they can order it online via the After 8 bookstore. So that's possible too. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
International shipping available.
And I always like to ask my guests how that would they define creativity in their own words. So how would you define creativity?
I love this question. First of all, I love questions and I love definitions and the idea that everybody's going to have their own idea of what creativity is. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think something essential about creativity is that it's collective and that it's collaborative. I think a conversation can be a very creative place. I think a collage is a model for something that's essentially creative because a collage is made of things you already have. And then I want to add maybe in the thinking to playgrounds. Creativity is working like collage with things you already have in a place you already are with people you already know. It's about reimagining what you have, what you're working with, and finding new ways for all those pieces to fit together.
Yeah, I love that. Everybody has a different definition and it's fascinating, and there is that overlap of collaboration, of inspiration, of synergy, flow states. So yeah, it's like a big connection, and finding ways to connect with people you normally might not be able to connect with. So I love that. And where can people connect with you and keep up with your work?
Yeah, so I've recently got a website going with my name, lilliandavies.com. Lillian with 3 L's, which is always confusing to the French who like to do a few fewer consonants and a few extra vowels. So I've got that, and I've got a newsletter that I do as often as possible when there's anything exciting to share that you can sign up for via my website. I've also got the Instagram, still moving, and yeah, those are the two main connections online. Voilà.
Fantastic. Well, we'll share all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks so much, Crystal, for the conversation and for all your great questions.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.